Say this every year, time lost at the beginning of the project is time lost forever, right? So let's get this show started. I'm Jim Zott, Director for the Project Management Graduate Program here at UT Dallas. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. Sitting at this table right here, we've got John Barden, my boss, at Dean of Associate Dean of Executive Education at UT Dallas. And he's also happy to see you all here today. Project Management in a VUCA world. Now, before this theme came out, did you all know what VUCA meant? No. And I was in Shanghai, China with a group of students the last couple of weeks, and in one of their presentations, the faculty at Shanghai Jiao Tong University, darned if you didn't have VUCA on his slide. So this is a term that's around the world. So in case you didn't learn what it meant from the Symposium website, here it is: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, to me, this doesn't feel like anything new. It kind of felt like this way, 30, 40 years ago when I got out of college and first went to work. But things are happening faster now, right? We've got electronic media, electronic communications. What used to take us weeks to do, now we do in days and in hours. So I'm looking forward to a really exciting symposium. I think we've got some great keynote speakers lined up, some good presentations, great meals, fellowship tonight at the networking reception. So thank you all for being here. Since we are a PMI registered education provider, and you all can get PDUs for this, they like for us to have learning objectives. So here are our learning objectives for the symposium. And so hopefully when you leave here, you can describe some of the latest thinking about what's going on in the world of project management, and hopefully go away with some ideas for how you might be able to do things better on your job, managing your projects or programs or businesses. And if you're curious, like I am, even at my old age here, always wanting to learn new things, find some topics of interest for further personal study. And the great thing about the internet era is all you got to do is go to Google or Google Scholar, and you can find all kinds of good stuff out there to read. As I say, I do direct the Executive Education Project Management program here for those that are thinking of getting that master's degree, and some folks start late in life, so that could still happen. We've got a Master of Science in Leadership and Organization Development, newly formulated with a concentration in project management. And so project management and OD, organization development, go together hand in hand. So I think that's going to be a really good offering, as well as our Master of Business Administration with the emphasis in project management, which is our flagship product. We're a serious school. We're both AACSB accredited, and we have the PMI Global Accreditation Center Project Management Education Programs accreditation. So we've been looked at under the microscope and found to be worthy of their accreditations. And then from our professional development side, we're a PMI registered education provider. And so the good news for that is, and with the app that we have all set up, if you do things correctly, your PDUs will automatically get uploaded to PMI. That's going to require you to do two things, which I'll talk about in a minute. On the professional development side, we do offer PMP exam prep courses once a quarter. And Susan Kennedy here, past president of PMI Dallas chapter, is our lead instructor for that program, and she took the lead on redesigning the curriculum for the latest edition of the PMBOK guide, freeing me up where I didn't have to do it, so thank you very much for that, Susan, and thanks for all your help. We have an applied project management forum that some of you attended. We do that every other month. That's free. Pick up a PDU there. And then we have, within the Jindal School, we've got a certificate of management program, which is online. It's kind of a mini MBA, and it can get you 54 PDUs, 19 in leadership, 25 in strategic and leadership, if that's something you're looking for. On the corporate side, that's not our emphasis, but we do work with companies on a semi-custom and custom basis as opportunities arise. Our biggest one that we worked with was CBRE. We did the course development for the Project Management Foundation's internal project manager certification program, actually before I came in here, so that started about 12 years ago. And then I guess about the same time we had the Panama Canal expansion program going on, and we got to train all the first round of project managers there. So we got a lot going on here at the school. If you're interested in learning more, just go to project.utdallas.edu and learn some more. In terms of our team, the great part about my job is I've done almost nothing other than show up this morning and say, welcome to be here. That's not quite true. I just sit in on steering team meetings more as an observer than a participant. But without the folks that you see on these slides here, we couldn't have done it. And Dallas chapter big partners in all of this. We've got 44 volunteers plus the names you see there, so almost 50 people from the PMI chapter help make the symposium possible every year. UT Dallas, you see our staff there. Kathy, are you in the room? Thank you, Kathy. You're already standing up. You're good fair catch signal. This is Kathy Lovelace. Kathy was the project manager for this year's event. Thank you very much, Kathy. She ran this as a leader almost single-handedly. And so the best thing you can say for yourself as a leader is you have good people in your organization where you can just empower and stay away and watch them succeed. And I think you've done really well. So thank you very much, Kathy, for taking this on. Also, Wayne Peterson, I don't know if Wayne is in the room or not, but Wayne is responsible for the app that we're getting to use that I'll talk about in a minute that has streamlined our process of reporting PDUs and knowing where to go. And then the rest of us on our internal team, both a combination of faculty, staff, and Renee LaBelle actually is an alumnus, and others are teachers and work here. For you guys that still smoke, I'm sorry, the bad news is the campus is totally smoke-free, or is supposed to be totally smoke-free, which means not only inside the buildings, but outside the buildings, and technically you're not even supposed to smoke in your car here, but I don't know that anybody's going to go looking for you, but if you do have to go out and sneak a cigarette someplace, please don't do it next to the air intakes for the building. We've had a few people that have done that on occasion, and as you can imagine, my office is on the receiving end of that. So please try to avoid smoking if you can. New access for Wi-Fi this year. Hopefully this will improve based on some of you had problems last year. So the username is EPFCM, and then the password is UTD12345, and that password is all capitalized. So for those that just can't get away from your devices for a little bit, here's the Wi-Fi access. And of course, if you haven't already, please place your phones on silent or vibrate, and I'm hoping that I did that with mine. If you do need to take a call, please take it outside the room so your neighbors aren't hearing you. We do have a business lounge in 1.502 in the main building that you can go to in as well. Here's the floor plan. So we're over in the ballroom, off on the left-hand side, and our keynotes lunch will be in here, just like in the past few years, and then all the breakout sessions will be across the street through the doors over there in the Jindal School of Management on the first floor. Restrooms in this building are, as it shows on the map, kind of right behind us over here, and then several locations across the way. I know we've got inclement weather coming in. Looking at the latest forecast, it looks like it's starting to weaken a little bit, so I don't think we're in danger of tornadoes today, but I'm not a weatherman, and I don't play one on television. The safest place to be in the event we do get a tornado warning is in the restrooms, where we got solid walls all around us, and we don't want to be near glass. So this room is not the safest place to be, and so we'd want to get out of here. And unfortunately, I don't think the restroom is going to hold 300 people, so that could be difficult if that alarm goes off. But if it does, we need to hunker down away from the glass wherever we can. Let's see. As I said, breakouts and panels are on the other side. Here's our schedule for the day. For today, so we've got my opening welcome. We have a keynote here in a minute. Then we've got breakout sessions across the way, lunch back over here, more breakouts, and panel discussions later in the afternoon. And then our second keynote will be just before the networking reception. And interestingly, the topic is networking, and so that will kind of lead us into the networking reception. And I'll warn you right now, hopefully our keynote speaker will get here. She's currently stuck in Oklahoma City, I think, trying to jockey with the weather and get here. So stay tuned. We might have a fill-in if there's something doesn't work there. Tomorrow, we'll open the day again back in here, 2 keynotes, some breakouts, and then back here for lunch and another keynote, and then wrap it up with breakout sessions in the afternoon. So we have listened to some of your feedback and done some rearrangements of the schedule and how we do things, and added a keynote, and we do appreciate you filling out those surveys at the end to give us that feedback. So for those of you that are social and want to get connected and tweet and do all that stuff that you high social folks do, there's a list of links here, and there's some handouts about. I guess I feel like a fossil or antisocial because I That's not my thing, and I look at that and I say, what is all that stuff? But if you know what it is and you want to get out there and share your experiences, by all means, please do so. So the Symposium app, if you haven't already discovered it, you can download it either from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store for the Android. And this is where all your information is. You'll notice we don't print the book anymore. It's just easier to use the app. And so you see you got the homepage, event description, event details, and our partners. Of course, the main thing is the schedule. So you can click on that schedule button at the bottom, and then you'll need to sign in. And signing in is very important because this is how we're going to get your PDUs registered. And so when you go to sign in, if you haven't set it up before, you would put in your name, your email address, and most important, your PMI member number. Member number. Now, that's not my member number, but actually it's not far from that. And not your PMP number. So that's what will tell PMI who you are and record those PDUs for you. And then when you go to the schedule page on the all over there on the left, you see we got the stars, and you see I filled in 2 of them. So I tapped those 2 for welcome and the connect consulting to construction. And then when I go look at made them favorites, and then I look at my favorites, I see I've got them in the favorites list. That's all that shows up there. And then if I go click on one of those and mark it attended, it'll show up in my attended list. So what's in your attended list is what's going to get reported to PMI. So when you leave here tomorrow, verify that you have marked everything attended that you want PDUs for. If you don't, it's not going to happen automatically. And then that gets very difficult. So please remember 2 things, member ID number and mark as attended. And the way you mark as attended is you drill down into the event that you're attending, and you'll see a mark as attended link. Click on that, and then it's going to change it to mark as unattended, and it'll also have a leave feedback that'll appear, and so you can come in and rate each individual presentation. And one of the rewards for doing so is if you do some ratings and all the rest, you'll get in the drawing for free admission to next year's symposium, as also for the exit survey at the end of the symposium. So 2 surveys, well actually multiple surveys. We got the ones for each individual speaker that we ask you to do, and then the one at the end of the symposium. And we do read these. We take them very seriously. We look for any trends, and the committee acts accordingly. So that's the app. If you're wondering, yes, we have picked dates for next year. The university is very busy, and basically these are the only 2 dates next year out of the entire calendar year that they could fit us in and do it in the format that we want, where we take over the first floor of the School of Management. So those are our dates next year. We'll look forward to seeing you back. And again, this evening we've got the networking reception at 4:45 today out in the atrium right here, and look forward to chatting with all of you. And so before we get into our first keynote, Varghese, our Associate Dean for the Jindal School of Management, I see made it through the traffic. Varghese, would you like to welcome folks?
I guess a good thing I wasn't coming from Oklahoma, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Although I'm close, I live very close, I guess. So it was a challenge getting in here. So I just want to say welcome to this conference. We have ordered perfect weather for you. You would prefer to stay in rather than be out today, I'm sure. You don't feel like you're missing out on the weather by wanting to be outside, so you'll have time to enjoy the conference, I guess. I don't want to take too long. I know this, one of the things I just want to mention is that the whole area of operations management, project management is highly regarded in our school. Our operations management program, for example, in research is ranked #1 in the journals they publish in. Our supply chain program is ranked #9 by Gartner. So this area is indeed one of the strongest areas in the school. And of course, as you might have seen, we've been doing this for about 13 years now. And we hope we'll keep going for several more years. Jim tells me it's always a successful conference, and I know it is a successful conference because I haven't heard any complaints so far. So that's a good sign. So I do want to thank Jim, who's been taking the initiative on this conference. and his staff for the time and effort they put into making this a successful conference. Having done conferences in the past in other areas, I know how difficult it is to make sure all the logistics, everything works. So thank you, Jim, and folks who are putting this together. Having said that, I know Jim tells me, I know you're going to enjoy the conference. This has always been a successful conference for us. And I know project management is one of the key areas, especially with the, since I'm in the area of information technology, when we used to teach, one of the things we would always talk about is systems, projects that fail. And one of the key aspects, and there are several, by the way, in information technology, I guess, projects. And one of the key things they talk about is project management. And I know this is an important area for all of us, especially for as we go into the tech areas, the importance of the tech areas. It's good to see all of you here and hope, I'm sure you are all evangelists for the project management topics. So thank you for coming out on this rainy day, and I hope you enjoy the conference. And if there are any complaints, send them to John. He's in charge of Exec Ed. So thank you again, and Jim, it's all yours.
Thanks. Next up is our first keynote presentation with Mike Wheeler from the Fluor Corporation. I had a chance to chat with Mike a little bit beforehand. He's got some really interesting things to say. If you go into the app again, you'll see his full bio over there. And so rather than steal time from him, I'll welcome up to the podium and let you get started. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, excellent. Well, good morning. I'm really happy to be here with you today. When I was contacted last October, I wasn't certain that I was the right one to talk about project management in a VUCA world. Like everybody else, I had to look up VUCA, but somebody was very fortuitous because as I stand here today, about 6 weeks ago at Fluor Corporation, our previous and retired chairman and CEO was put on the board of directors. About 3 weeks ago, we had our earnings announcement. We surprised Wall Street with a loss for the quarter. Our CEO resigned. Our chief legal officer was promoted to CEO, and our retired chairman is now our executive chairman. And then our head of energy and chemicals, our largest business line, retired. And our CEO yesterday on a town hall said that the changes aren't done. So we got a lot of volatility, we got a lot of uncertainty, we got a lot of ambiguity. And at the same time, we're still executing a lot of very complex projects. So I'll share a little bit about that with you, but definitely understand what a VUCA world is right now. So what is Fluor? Fluor is, we're a global corporation based here in Irving, Texas. We are one of the world's largest EPC, engineering, procurement, construction firms around. We design, build, and maintain assets for our clients. Again, all the way around the world. We've got 60 countries, 4,000 clients. Revenue last year was $19.2 billion. And that 53,000 employees, about 35,000 of those are professionals. The other are craft laborers. And we are a 107-year-old company. So we've been around quite a while. Here's a little bit of our financial performance. Backlog for us is a very good thing. It shows strength. We see there that we have about $40 billion currently in backlog. Revenue is right around, fluctuating anywhere from 18 to 20, maybe 22 at max. So having a 2-to-1 ratio of revenue, backlog to revenue is a very strong characteristic. And then very strong pre-award or award performance recently. A lot of that uptick is due to mining and metals, which we're seeing a big comeback in. Copper, lithium, gold, mining is strengthening. And then we also signed a big LNG, liquid natural gas project up in Canada, $14 billion project, which we're 60% joint venture partner on that. So that's what's driving a lot of that award performance. We do, it says there we do fit for purpose EPFCM. So what is EPFCM? That's engineering, procurement, fabrication, construction, and maintenance. So we want to look and help our owners, our clients, with the entire life cycle of a capital asset, from pre-feed, front-end engineering design, all the way to decommissioning and end of life of those assets. I run the supply chain organization. We like to think of that as a strength, and it is. Not to be self-promoting or anything, but we have a very strong supply chain organization. We've been driving a lot of best cost country sourcing, low cost country sourcing, and been doing an excellent job at helping deliver value for our projects, as well as manage the risk on those projects. We have gotten into the fabrication business. It is a tough business, but at the same time, what it does is it allows us to modularize a lot of our equipment so we don't have to build in the field. So under very controlled conditions in a fabrication yard, we can fabricate those modules and then ship them to the site. And we do that typically in a very low-cost country. So for instance, one of our big fab yards that we are a joint venture on is in Zhuhai, China, in the south, down near Hong Kong. And we'll produce modules up to 5 to 10,000 metric tons. And then we'll roll them off, put them on a barge or a ship, send them to the project site, and roll them off and set them in place. Obviously, we do operate in a lot of very tough areas. We have a big project going on currently in Kazakhstan, 2 large projects in Kuwait, in the Philippines, all over China, and then obviously in the U.S. Gulf Coast, South America, and so forth. So, and Australia. So quite a bit of challenging and remote environments, especially some of the mining locations are very high in altitude and very desolate. And we do deliver sustainable projects. Now, obviously, we've had some problems here recently, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those execution issues because they are part of what is needed to learn. If I start from the right over there, Diversified Services, so that is really our operations and maintenance arm, also our equipment company, and our staffing solutions. We do help our clients with startup. And what's been interesting is we tend to go through mechanical completion. So once the capital projects gets to mechanical completion, that's usually the end of our work. But now, more often now, we're being asked to help with commissioning. And even in some cases, we're being required as part of the contract to actually operate plants for a period of time to be able to prove that we did do the capital correctly. Obviously, construction is a big part of it. Many years ago, we got out of the self-performed construction business and just subcontracted with subcontractors to do the construction. Recently, in the last few years, we've gotten back into the self-perform. A lot of the U.S. Gulf Coast projects, we will bring our own crews to help with the construction. Mentioned fabrication. Besides Zhuhai, we have a fabrication yard that we're joint venture in Mexico with Fluor is the entity. We had 2 other fabrication facilities, one in Canada, one in the Philippines, which we have shut down. And then we have a small fabrication yard up in Russia that supports Sakhalin Island, which is a specific project. Procurement, like I mentioned, we have a very strong supply chain organization. We still go by the nomenclature procurement, but it really has to do with sourcing, material management, and subcontract management. So that's really what we do there in the procurement area. And in the material management goes all the way from material planning to issuing materials to the construction teams, including procurement, sourcing, procurement, expediting, logistics, and then field material management. Engineering and design, that's really been our bread and butter. We've had some challenges lately, and I'll share a little bit of that with you. And this is our portfolio. We have Diversified Services, mentioned that already. We've got a government group which does work for Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and even some black ops work. Under the government group, we were helping restore power in Puerto Rico. That was one of our big projects last year. Then we have the Life Sciences Advanced Manufacturing Group, where we're helping build life sciences, such as the Novo Nordisk in North Carolina, and advanced manufacturing, Procter & Gamble, we're one of their preferred builders, as well as we're doing a lot of data centers now for a company I can't name. Infrastructure and power. Infrastructure, you might know we've done the Tappan Zee Bridge in New York, which is now the Mario Cuomo Bridge. We did the bridge downtown Dallas, the one over I-30, and the Horseshoe Project there, I-30, I-35. As well as we are executing a lot of light rail projects. We have a light rail project in Maryland, Boston, Chicago, and we're doing the LAX People Mover in Los Angeles in anticipation of the Olympics. As I mentioned, mining and metals has been a growth area for us. It is a very cyclical business. We saw a real steep downturn in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 time period, hit the bottom of the trough last year, and now we're starting to see a rise in that. And then energy and chemicals. Energy and chemicals is typically our largest business line, about 60%, 55, 60% of our business. It has been down, and so we're starting to see a little bit of a rise back in there. But we do a lot of work from liquid natural gas plants to chemicals to refineries and so forth. Okay, so I mentioned we're having some challenges with execution. We've had a few write-offs. There's a recent article when our CEO stepped down on the Dallas Morning News about the fact that we've had $1 billion of write-offs in the last 3 years. That's the reason he's no longer our CEO. Execution. That's been one of our biggest challenges. So about 4 years ago, we embarked on a project with IBM Watson. And what we said is we need to figure out how to use data analytics to drive us to execute projects better. So we created this, we call it EPHD, so it's EPC, Project Health Diagnostics. And what we've done is we've taken a lot of our historical projects, loaded them into a database. We had to do a lot of cleansing and a lot of attribution to that data to get to have it ready. But then we're driving that into IBM Watson, and it's using a number of different analytical methods to look at how are we performing. And we can do that very early in the life cycle of a project, and it's going to portray for us or project for us how we think that, how the system says that project is going to execute. So for instance, we may, even at 30% engineering, be behind in engineering time, over in engineering hours, other characteristics are happening. It'll tell us exactly, or pretty precisely, how far off we're going to be when that project is done executing after, say, 4 or 5, maybe sometimes 7 years. So that is really changing the way in which we execute our projects. It's changed the way in which we review our projects. We can now sit down, the CEO has access, he can sit down, pull it up, and start running the diagnostics and being able to run their own reports. And we're also working on, if you had the whiteboard in front of you, like you've seen on some of the Watson things, with the various data elements, you can move those around, put things in the back, pull things out, and just move it around and be able to get a report. We're also working on a voice recognition where we can actually speak to it and be able to tell it what we want it to do, and then that report will happen. So that is a very important project that we are working on. The second one there that we're doing with Watson is around market dynamics and spend analytics. So that's helping us better forecast the cost of things we're going to buy. So what we did there is several years ago, probably again about 4 or 5 years ago, we said, if we're going to estimate and we're going to source and we're going to procure things, we need to know what they're going to cost. And in many cases, we need to know a year in advance. Because when I estimate a project, it may be another several months before we submit that proposal. It may be several more months before a client takes a decision, and several more months before we start. So 6, 8, 9 months is not unusual to go by before we've won the project and we're ready to start even thinking about buying things. So I better be very good at estimating. So this database we created was taking all of our historical data, again, doing some cleansing, doing some attribution, getting into a standard format, and then being able to use that for benchmarking. And we're just doing some very simple benchmarking initially. Then when we met up with Watson, we said, take that same data and go run your data analytics tools against it. Bring in other sources. So they're bringing in forecasts for commodity. What are commodities going to do? What's nickel going to do? What's copper going to do in price? It's bringing in currencies and using that to predict where that price of that item is going to be in the next year. So that's, again, giving us a very strong capability to better estimate, better source, and better procure. And then we've done a lot around innovation. Again, this is a first of the kind tool in the industry. We were very, I would say, smart in what we did is we signed a 10-year contract with IBM that they couldn't offer this to any of our competitors. So we've got an exclusive license to be able to do this. It does give us a lot of business insights. Our normal way of operating a project is every month we have a PSR, a project status review. The project director has a lot of cross-functional people in the room, people from outside the project. They come in and we review the project status and we ask questions and give feedback and so forth. But those status reviews take days, weeks to prepare. We're usually, if I'm doing a status review in May, I'm looking at end of April data. So a month and a half may have gone by since I'm of the data that I'm looking at. And frankly, a project director can tell any story they want to tell because they control the data. Now with Watson, the data is coming directly out of our various source systems, goes into Watson, and then the reports are run, and we can start to look at it. So it's really giving the off-project people an opportunity to help our projects in their execution phase. So some of the value, again, ePhD, it's giving us this fact-based insight. You know, I like to say at Fluor, first off, I've been at Fluor 4.5 years, so I'm a newcomer. You know, most of my colleagues have 15, 20, 30 years experience. There's a lot of stories. And you get on projects, you hear a lot of stories. I went to a project in Louisiana, we were having some execution issues. They asked me the client asked all of the senior leaders in the various disciplines to come participate, help them get this project back on track. So I started going to the monthly PSRs in Louisiana, and I got there, and one of our associate project directors pulled me aside, and she said, Mike, you know, we're not executing well. Your supply chain team is really falling down. They haven't even ordered the basic materials yet, and engineering's complete. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really bad. So you know, I immediately turned to the engineering manager and said, give me your engineering curves. I want to see that engineering is complete. I want to see when it was complete. I want to understand why my people haven't been able to order their materials. Well, it turns out engineering wasn't even anywhere close to being complete. And that was causing the delays in the system that was then delaying the procurement of the materials. But now we have facts. Now we have data. Now, and I'll tell you give you a few indicators later, but we can look at the data and tell what's going on in a project. Our project directors can't tell the story that they want to tell anymore. The story is being told for them. And it does help us predict issues. You know, what do we see coming? What can we now proactively start to manage in order to bring this thing back on track or back in line with what we estimated? And it helps us identify the root causes rather than, again, in the old days, you know, we do a PSR, or worst case, if we had a really problem project, we'd send in a red team, and they would review the project. That would usually be 2 weeks of interviews, sifting through reports and data, and then coming up with conclusions, identifying what corrective actions need to take place, and then executing those. Well, that whole cycle is weeks long there. Now we can identify, really through Watson, what the root cause of a lot of these issues are and take immediate action to go solve those. On the MDSA side, again, it's a tool that provides us insight into the supply chain. You know, really, one of the things that's interesting, when you go out when you're in the bidding process for a project, you tend to go out for budgetary quotes. So we'll go to our supply base and ask for budgetary quotes. And through those budgetary quotes, you have to tell them a little bit about your strategy. How are we going to execute this project? Well, what you find is suppliers are a good source of information for contractors like us, because we ask, okay, what's CB&I, or what's Jacobs, or what's KBR, or what's Bechtel doing when they're coming out to you and asking for their quotes? So we get a lot of feedback, but we also know the same thing is happening with ours. Our information is going through those same people to our competition. What we're able to do now with MDSA is basically estimate our projects without ever getting a budgetary quote. So that is now less intelligence in the supply chain for our competition to know exactly what we're going to do. So for us, we see that having multiple advantages for that. And we are doing a lot around hedging of commodities and hedging of currency, or using those currency fluctuations to be able to drive that last 3-5% of savings. And again, it does bring in a lot of external information. We've even looked at weather-related information. For instance, we had a proposal, a project that we were proposing on in Ohio. We were going to modularize and fabricate in China, ship them over to New Orleans, transload them on barges, barge them up the Mississippi, and park them right. The project was on up the Mississippi to the Ohio River, up the Ohio River, and our project site was on the Ohio River. And great strategy, sound philosophy, and then all of a sudden somebody started looking at the schedule. He said, well, we're looking at floating those up the Mississippi in the springtime, and the Mississippi tends to rise, and these modules are 25, 30 feet tall, And guess what? They won't go under the bridge. So we had to redo the schedule and look at the way in which we're going to execute those, because we would have probably run into flooding and not being able to, we'd had those barges stacked up in New Orleans waiting to go up the Mississippi. So all that stuff comes into play, but we've looked at how does weather impact our schedule, and can we bring that information into IBM Watson? So this is our timeline. Again, we started back in 2015, did some data collection, did some data modeling, looked at our ontology, looked at a lot of correlation analysis. So we had to work a lot with Watson very closely to correlate the data and see, okay, this was considered a successful project. It came in on schedule, it came in on cost. Does the data that we would get back from Watson corroborate that story? So we looked at those correlations. We did a lot of predictive modeling, and then we did our first deep dive back in 2015. So we can run a standard report, which is just kind of the basic information, and then we can run a deep dive, which really gets into the root causes of what's going on within that project. So that began in 2015. 2016 then, we started adding the descriptive analytics, the user interface, so we could do the touch screens and such, the neural network, and then our data quality. It was at this time we said, you know, if we're going to be serious about data analytics, we really need to have standardized data. Right now, it takes 3 months when we decide to put a project into EPHD. It takes us 3 months to cleanse and attribute that data before it can go into EPHD. We want it to go directly from our systems and into EPHD. So we started a big effort around data standardization, and we call it Unison. And so that is now our big effort. One of our big pushes is to get every project to use the same data, same setup, same set of values, same metrics, same method of measure, and that way then we can start to get standard data that rolls directly in. So we can do more real-time look at these projects. 2017, we started putting in some dashboards and more reporting tools. We automated that standard story, and we really began to ratchet up the reviews. I will tell you, one thing about the capital project industry is everybody gets sued. Okay, we sue subcontractors, they claim against us, the owners claim against us, we claim against them. And there was a lot of consternation, especially in our legal organization, about, wow, if we have this powerful tool and yet something still goes wrong, what does that create for us? What kind of liability is that? So I will tell you, from 2015 to 2017, that debate kept kind of cycling around. You know, we were limiting the access, who could actually look at the data, who could be part of the project reviews. And then finally, really in 2018, we said, the heck with it, we just need to use it. We just need to really get on with it. We were starting to get enough data built up to where it was the right thing to do. But it was very difficult at first to get that momentum and get people to realize. And also then, the project directors didn't like the fact that they had somebody checking on them. You know, our project directors are kings. They're CEOs of their own little corporation, and some not so little. Some are managing $5, $6, $7, $10 billion projects. So they don't like people looking at them. They don't like people reviewing them. They don't like information going off project. They want to keep it all in the project, tell their story, execute, and just let everybody else worry about something else. So getting them to really want to do these reviews, be participating, be able to take that information and go back to the project and make the changes necessary, that took a lot of change management too in the same timeline. So today we're continuing to enhance it, adding in some more health monitoring. I would say in 2015 when we began the data collection, we probably had 300 data elements. Today we're up to around 500 data elements. So as we've continued to use this information, use this system, we're learning we need more data, and we're identifying those elements and bringing those in. As I mentioned, data visualization is coming in, the bundle belief network, and then Watson Best Fit. So we are continuing to invest in this tool and continuing to invest in our ability to execute projects in a much better way. So what are some of the things EPHD has told us? Well, one thing it's told us is, on average, our engineering is 30% late. So you think about that. Engineering's 38% late, actually. If engineering's late, then procurement's late. And if procurement is buying the materials to go to the fabrication site, which we do, the fabricator's late. So we may have missed the fabrication window. or we've got a change order back on us for extension of time. And if the fabricator's late, then construction's late, but construction will start to say, well, okay, just flood the site with materials, we'll open up a bunch of work fronts, and we'll get things started. So all of a sudden, we're rush ordering things, air freighting bulk items, which is crazy, and next thing you know, I've got materials just all over the site. So that's not what you want to do, but that tends to be today when we find the projects that are suffering is happening. So it all starts with engineering. We got to be able to engineer quickly, easily, efficiently, and on time. Now, we don't really fully understand why we're having some of these problems, but one of the things is what we found is owners have pushed the risk on us. We've gone from a reimbursable environment to a lump sum environment. So when I joined 4 years ago, our portfolio was probably 20% lump sum, 80% reimbursable. Today, our projects we're executing are 49% lump sum, 51% reimbursable. Our prospects in energy and chemicals is nearly 90% lump sum and 10% reimbursable. So we've seen the shift of risk from the owner to the contractor, and at the same time, because of some of the slowdown in capital spending that we've had the last few years, the contractors are getting desperate. And we're all trying to win that. We're all competing. We're all trying to win that work. We're trying to name that tune in 2 notes when it really should be 6. And so we're compressing schedules and we're bringing things in. And that is creating, I think, some of the problem with our engineering. But that's the world we live in. That's the world we have to compete. That's the world we operate in. So we're using Watson to help us get better at being able to do that. So you see there we've completed or loaded in 120 EPC projects. We have 15 years of historical data. And we have 12 projects that are being monitored on a regular basis. We tend to hold these reviews quarterly, sometimes more often if we need to, but tend to hold them quarterly, and we continue to monitor a lot of these projects as close to real time as we can, with the cleansing of the data as being the gating factor. You can see here we got over $500 million, $500 million total installed costs, and we're really focusing on energy and chemicals, power, although we have exited the combined cycle lump sum power business, but we still have power projects under execution, so we're continuing to monitor those. And now we're including mining and metals as one of the big up-and-coming markets for us. We haven't yet taken it to life sciences, advanced manufacturing, nor to infrastructure yet. We probably will over time, but these are the ones that are usually the biggest, most complex projects that we have to deal with. So you can see we're continuing to evaluate potential construction execution analytics, congestion modeling. So that is what we're finding now with modularization. We're finding that as we do, we're shrinking the footprint of a lot of these plants that we build. The problem becomes is, can I get enough laborers into the area to be able to do the construction activity? So those are the constraints that we have with some of these, where we've got such a small footprint that it's difficult to get the right number of people in to hit the productivity numbers or to even catch up sometimes. So we're looking at using Watson for that, some cost predictive models like we're doing with our MDSA. We did identify 2 or 3 other projects similar to MDSA. We'd like to do some in the logistics area to help us with especially with our modular logistics movements and such. Obviously looking at that cognitive interface and continue to expand the analytics and the user interface. And then what we're calling right now higher order Watson, artificial intelligence. So it's been a great partnership we've had with IBM. In fact, what's interesting is IBM is also, obviously they've gone all in on data analytics, but they're now also looking to put some of these same analytical tools into other commercial applications. For market dynamics, very same story, similar story. We began really the data collection in 2015. We started with a lot of the stuff that you normally would start with: pipe, steel, vessels, pumps, fittings, a lot of the mechanical equipment, static, rotating equipment. Then we moved into electrical instrumentation. And now this year, what we've started to do is, that's been all on the materials side. Now we're starting to include subcontracts, so the services side. So we're starting to gather that data, do the same thing, get it cleansed, get it attributed, and get into a database that we can start then to feed it into Watson. So some of the other key things we're trying to do, so I talked about the fact that, you know, in many situations, or some situations, we ended up flooding the site with materials. Oops. Jumped way ahead. Okay. So one of the things we've done is we've implemented a tool, radio frequency identification. Atlas Jovix is the tool, specific tool we're using. Oh, this thing keeps jumping ahead. Let me see if I can, I'm going to set this down. So RFID is, no, still doesn't. It really wants to go to that slide, doesn't it? So we are using RFID for execution. I'll just let it go. It's helping us manage the materials on site. In fact, what we did on one of the largest projects ever to use RFID, one of our Kuwait projects, we issued 400,000 tags to our suppliers. And we said, tag those materials before you ship. And that way then we can start to see where it is in the movements. And then once it gets to site, we can quickly receive. We can, if there's any overages, shortages, or damages, we can process those much more quickly. We can put the material away. And then what we do, since most of this material is not in a warehouse, it's in a big laydown yard out in the open, is we strap readers on a pickup truck and we drive up and down the laydown yard and it records all the tags, all those RFID tags. So we know every day where that material last was. So then when we get a request from construction to issue materials, we can go into the system, identify those materials. It'll actually tell us where those materials are located and the most efficient route to go pick those materials. That has several benefits. One, it's reducing the cycle time to find and pick. But secondly, it's now, in the old days, what we used to have to do is we had a grid system, and we'd identify which grid we put those materials into, and then hopefully when we went back, they're in that same grid. If not, we have to kind of hunt and pack and find them. But what we do is we send people out with little flags, and they'd identify where the materials are, so the truck could come and pick those materials up and take them over to construction. Well, that requires having crews out there with the materials and trucks moving at the same time. So that whole man-machine interface is always a safety challenge. It's an area where we can have accidents and injuries. What we found is our people are spending a lot less time going out to find that material and be able to pick it easily. So that man-machine interface has been reduced quite a bit. So we've seen our safety statistics improve as well. Let's see if I can get it to go back. We've also then been working on robotic process automation, another tool basically to help us automate manual transactions. So RPA has been very helpful for us. We've implemented supply chain financing, go quickly, and we're part of the data standardization, and we're trying to get better visibility to our materials. Like I said, with RFID, if we can tag those materials at the supplier site, we can start to help that in the whole logistics area. But what we really want to do is we want to be able to see visibility of those materials all the way through our supply chain. So go back to not just who's supplying it to us, but they have sub-suppliers. We want to be able to see that visibility so that we can better predict when that material is going to be ready for shipment, ready for receiving at site. And that way then, rather than having 90 days worth of materials on hand, which is what our construction folks want, I can operate in a more real-time environment, just-in-time type of environment. Not quite just-in-time like you see in the automotive industry, but a lot more just-in-time to where we can have fewer materials on hand and have that assurity that those materials are going to be there when we need them. Because all of our project directors, our construction managers, all want to be able to go out there, see the material on the ground, see and know that they're going to be able to use it and be able to open a work front and get their construction going. Okay, that's it about Fluor. Just a little bit about my experience. I started my career in aerospace defense electronics doing computer integrated manufacturing. And as I reflected on that, I'm like, that was really in more of a project-based environment. And then I went into consulting, and I was on consulting projects. I did that 21 years. You'll see there, Gemini, CSC, A.T. Kearney, and then my own company. And again, a lot of, went from general business process reengineering to managing complex, transformational type programs. God, this thing just keeps going. And then obviously, Fluor Corporation now. Prior to Fluor, I was in Mumbai, India, working for Reliance Industries Limited, the largest private company in India. I was helping them transform their procurement and contracting, so their supply chain. So I've been in the project environment quite a bit, and obviously must enjoy it because I've been doing it nearly 40 years. But it's really taught me a lot of lessons. And since it really wants to go to this slide, I'll just go to that slide. No, it won't go now, right? There we go. Okay. So as you think about how do you manage a consulting project to transform somebody, it's difficult. And I'll tell you, I've been living it the last 4 years, 4.5 years at Fluor, transforming our supply chain. And I use this same approach. I've used the same approach all the time, this Cotter's 8 steps. First you got to have, what is your vision? What's your sense of urgency? When I went over to India to help Reliance with their transformation program in procurement contracting, I had a huge challenge. Not only was I in a new environment, new country, new way of doing business, very different than what we do in the Western world. And it was, even though it's a publicly held company, it's really a private company held by Mukesh Ambani, and they run it as it's Mukesh's company. So working directly for him, he was all about transformation, so that's great. Chairman, CEO, wants to transform, he's driving the program. I felt really good about that, but there wasn't a sense of urgency. His vision was to have, it was aspirational. He wanted to create the next 2 generations of leadership. He wanted to digitize. He wanted to have automation. But nobody ever said, what are we doing wrong today? And in fact, they're probably one of the most successful growing companies. They've been growing 25% year over year for many, many years. It's been a great story for them. So we never really had that strong sense of urgency. What is it, what is it that's driving us to change? And without some sort of burning platform or some sort of urgency, it's difficult to get people to transform, to change. And people are always your toughest part of any kind of transformation program. It's easy to put in systems, relatively easy to put in systems, relatively easily to put in new practices and processes, relatively easy to cleanse the data, get the data management up to a point. But getting the people to actually act differently, think differently, behave differently, that's always one of our biggest challenges. So then, number 2, you got to have that guiding coalition. Again, going in, I said, hey, the chairman's the head of this project. He is driving the transformation. But what I found is you get down below him and you start to find what we at Fluor call the clay layer. It's those managers that don't want to change, who've been doing it the same way for 20 or 30 years, who believe they're doing it the best way possible, and they just don't want to change. So it's finding that clay layer and figuring out how to deal with them. I always like to say, give me your toughest critic. Give me the person who doesn't want to change the most, and put them on my team, and let me see if I can get them to change. If I get them to change, that's a huge sign to the rest of the company that this is the right thing to go do. Unfortunately, at Reliance, we had their de facto CPO was dead set against change. Asked many times to join the program, asked many times to help us. He never, ever bought in. And so we always had that kind of division, so we never had that guiding coalition. And then, obviously having that vision. And again, Mukesh's vision, it would change. It would change from time to time. When I first started, they had already been doing an internal transformation for 2 years. So they'd gone through, redesigned the whole operating model for procurement and contracting, and created really a good product. And Mukesh looked at it and said, it's a good product, but I want global best practices. I want the best of the best. So he brought in A.T. Kearney to be the consultant. He brought me in to help manage his side of the table on that transformation. And we did that for about 9 months. At the end of 9 months, he says, that's pretty good, but I was just talking to SAP, and they've got global best practices too. So let's take the SAP, let's put the A.T. Kearney work on the shelf, let's put the other work we've done on the shelf, and let's go design this using SAP best practices. So we did that for about 2 months. Everybody realized we were going to go from driving a Lamborghini to a Yugo. It was not the right thing to do. So finally, he threw up his hands and said, okay, everybody just tell me what you want to do. Give me your best of the 3 different models, and we'll go do that. So we kind of went down that path. But that vision kept changing. It seemed like every time he talked to another consultant, he talked to McKinsey, he talked to Bain, BCG, SAP, whomever, he'd come back with a little bit different vision. But he did have I'll tell you, one of the things I took away most, he did have a laser lock on data. And as I was talking about this data standardization, if you're going to do data analytics, I think every company has to do data analytics. You've got to have good data. And he taught me that one day when we were reviewing our project with him, and he stopped me and he says, Mike, you know, you're way off. Your data is poor quality. It stinks. I go, yes, I know it. I know we have a strong effort to clean it up. It's getting better. He goes, no, it needs to be 100%. It doesn't need to get better. It needs to be 100%. And I said, we had a little bit of philosophical debate. Well, you'll never get to 100% clean data. But, you know, he said, okay, do this. Just open up your material master, grab one material line item, and I want you to walk me through all the fields, and there were probably about 70 or 80 fields. I want you to tell me the range of values and the decisions we're making off of each of those values in each of those fields. Well, I knew I couldn't do that. So I said, well, Mukesh, you're running a $50 billion company. Why do you want to go through the material master, one line item, and have that discussion? He goes, because I want to show you your data quality is poor, and we got to clean it up. So I said, point taken, we'll do that. And so, but I'll tell you, the data quality thing is a real big issue. And I'm a firm believer, if you're going to run a project, you've got to have some sort of data analytics. So get your data quality there. Then is communicating. So I'm a big believer in over-communication. I think in any change program, when there's risk, when there's fear, when there's you know, what's our Avoca word? There's ambiguous and uncertainty, especially the uncertainty. Communication is paramount. Again, on the Reliance transformation, that at one point, after about 3 months of working on the operating model, and it was a pretty thick document, a stack of papers about this big if you print it out, Mukesh said, okay, I want a new operating model from you every night of the week. And we were working 6 days, Monday through Saturday. And I said, well, that's crazy. I mean, you know, operating models, you shouldn't be changing them that fast. He goes, no. Every night, 6 o'clock, send me a new operating model. So for 3 weeks, every night, we just put the whole team through the ringer, gave him a new operating model. Overnight, he'd hand scratch about 3 pages of notes, send them to us, and the next morning, we take those 3 pages, we start working on the next version of the operating model. To be frank, I couldn't communicate to our procurement contracting team, because had I communicated to them, we would have looked like fools, because today we're going west, tomorrow we're going east, the day after that we're going north, and after that we're going south. So we kept exploring all these various areas, and it made communication difficult. I mean, at one point I went 6 months without communicating at all what we were doing, and the rumors were the project was dead, we were all going to get fired. But it just made it difficult because of the rapid and constant evolving operating model. It made it difficult to actually communicate to them what it is what we were developing and designing. Then obviously, you know, you want to start to get others empowered to act on that. Empowerment, at least in India, is not a word, especially at a company like Reliance. They don't tend to empower people. They tend to collect all the decisions at the top, and then everybody else below them are executing. So, you know, within the first month, they asked me to give them a delegation of authority model. So I developed one starting with the buyer, to the senior buyer, to the manager, on up through the various levels, and presented that to them. And they said, I don't know about this. Give me an example. Who's a buyer that would have the authority, this level of authority? And I gave him a name. And he goes, oh, no, that person stinks. They're really, I would never trust them with a rupee. So then he started giving me a list of names of people he would trust. And I said, well, we can't design the delegation authority to all the people that you trust and don't trust. So again, philosophically, that thing just kind of languished for a couple years. And finally, when we were designing the system, after about 2 years, they said, Mike, we're ready to put the delegation of authority in. What should we put in? So I just pulled out the original one and said, just put this in. You know, we'll see what they say. But it was tough to get empowerment. It was tough to get people to own the vision, own the results, and then act upon those results. And that's really very, very key. And then getting short-term wins. I went there on a 2-year contract, thinking, you know, I could probably go all the way from design to finish. Took me 4 years to finish those 2 years. Still didn't really get finished. We implemented a few things, but every time we get to a short-term win, we get pulled back. Nope, it's not perfect yet. It's got to be perfect before we implement. One of the first things we developed was a university to provide training to our team, and we had about 8 or 10 courses developed and had another equal number in various stages of production. And I said, okay, we want to open the university and start training people. No, don't have enough courses. You got to develop more. So we spent a few more months developing some more. Nope, not perfect yet. And then finally, I just said, the heck with it. We're just going to open it. So we opened. We started doing training. 6 months later, I told them how many people they'd trained. They said, thank you, that's good. So, but you had to create those short-term wins. You had to start building some momentum, because the momentum builds upon itself, and it really gets projects moving in a good direction. Then obviously you want to consolidate those improvements and start to look at continuous improvement. What can we do to institutionalize that? What can we do to take that to the next level? So if you ever are involved in a transformation project, I would encourage you to look up Kotter's 8 steps, because that framework is extremely successful. So what are some of the things you need to have deliver a sustainable transformation? And I'll tell you, as a consultant, I was always critical of my own profession, because what I would see is you go into a company, you'd help them for 6, 12, 18 months. Sometimes I was there for 2 years. You'd walk away, you'd come back a couple years later and ask them how it went. They go, well, it started dwindling after the consultants left, and pretty soon now we're not doing it anymore. So after hearing that story time and time again, I said, okay, we need to do better at having a sustainable transformation. And one of the first things is, it can't be called the McKinsey initiative. It can't be called the BCG initiative. It's got to be something the company owns. Because if they attach it to the consultant, it'll never be sustained. It rarely will be sustained within the company. So having that as a company initiative, aided by consultants, is fine. But it's got to be the company that's owning it and driving it. And as I talked about the clay layer, that middle management, that's always the toughest part of any consulting project, is getting them to change. And like I said, I like to take them on my team. I like to take a few of the biggest critics and try and convert them. There have been times, though, I've taken a couple of biggest critics. They were dead set against change, so we changed them. We changed them out. And that's the thing you got to do with your project managers, with your client, is tell them, hey, we may come to a time where we can't get people to change or get a person to change. We may have to make some changes. Are you ready, willing, able to do that? And that's a tough question, but it definitely strikes a chord when people start seeing what happens to those that resist. We obviously want to reinforce those new behaviors. To me, a transformation program is an opportunity to start behaving differently. It isn't you wait till the end and you say, okay, we've now started, we're now transformed, we're now going to operate differently. No, you got to start those behaviors during the transformation program and then reinforce those through recognition and reward in some cases. And then, there is a fundamental question everybody asks: what's in it for me? What am I going to get from being part of this transformation? And being able to answer that is a huge, huge effort, but also a very important effort within a project. And you got to look at it a lot of different ways, whether it's by job title, job description, function, organization, geography. What is it that they are going to get from being a part of this transformation program, and be able to start to buy in and feel at least some of the uncertainty is gone. They know what to expect. They know what they will get from it. They know what it will do for them. Then obviously involvement from bottom to the top. And I put it in that order because if you can get that, obviously you've got your top leadership that's supportive. They're part of your steering committee. But if you can get that bottom of the organization energized, owning it, some very basic tools that we used to use on projects. We used to have brown papers where we'd put the process flow up there on a piece of butcher paper, and then we'd invite team members to come in and put Post-it notes up to write down what's a strength and what's a weakness and what's kind of neutral. So then you step back and all of a sudden you see, oh, all the red stickies are over here on this step of the process. So we got a problem over there. Let's go fix that. And then we'd redesign the process, and then we'd redo the butcher paper, the future state, the to-be state on a butcher paper. Again, invite those people to come back in. Now, does this address the things you had fed back to us? And they start to feel a part of it. They start to feel like they are they have a voice, that they've touched the product, that it is part of their product that they are helping deliver. So again, very low tech, but very effective way to get that bottom of the organization energized. And then make it simple. And I will tell you as a consultant, it used to drive me crazy. We would take the simplest things and make them so complex to where, it make us look smart, it make us get higher fees. But in the end, it's all about, it's got to be simple. It's got to be direct, it's got to be simple, it's got to be rational, it's got to be logical. And so for me, a really well done transformation is a very simple exercise. It's something people can really understand. You can tell it, you can influence them, they can understand it, and they can make it happen. So that to me is one of the keys to a successful transformation. So one of the other things that doesn't like that slide either, does it? Oops. Okay. High-performing teams. So you're running a project. Everybody wants to have a high-performing team. I'd love to have a high-performing clicker. Actually, it was when we were doing the work at Occidental here in Dallas that we had two aspects to that project. One, we were transforming their supply chain, so we were looking at the supply chain organization, everything from strategic sourcing to logistics to their distribution network and so forth. But we also had another effort going on with the president and his direct reports. They wanted to become a high-performing team. There was a little bit of dysfunctionality, the communication wasn't good, so they really wanted to become a high-performing team. So we had a high-performing team aspect of the project with the CEO or the president. And very basic stuff, but it's amazing what it can do to transform people. So first off is listening. It's amazing how many people don't listen, how many people talk, but never really listen. As a leader, you have to listen. So we talked about listening. How do you listen? It's not just listening, it's making certain that when somebody says something, it doesn't trigger a thought in your mind, which it naturally will, and next thing you know, you're not part of the conversation. Your mind has gone elsewhere. So, little techniques like, okay, when I find myself wandering, I'm gonna write that thought down because obviously it's important, but I'm gonna get it on paper in a headline so I can come back and listen to what's really happening in the conversation. So listening is very important. Also then there's that background conversation. So somebody says something and that triggers something in the back of your mind and it sticks back there. You're thinking, oh, that'll never work, this is not the right thing to go do. And you never voice that. It's just that little voice in the back of your head. Well, part of what this is setting up an environment where it's safe to bring those background conversations out into the foreground and actually have a mature and open communication about that. Then it's also about listening for possibilities. Too often when we listen to conversations, participate in conversations, we're thinking about all the risks, all the negative things, all the reasons why this won't work. And so listening for that possibility and making those possibilities part of the conversation so that you can bring them out and make those successful. I talked about the background conversation, so just, again, taking those background conversations and bringing them out in the foreground and dealing with them, and then saying, okay, that's done. So we don't have to come back and have to overcome those background conversations in the future. And then looking for possibility action descriptions. So there's different conversations with different outcomes, but making sure, this may be one where we actually have to take action. This is one where, there's a call, sense of urgency, we gotta go do something. Another one, we may just be getting general information out, more of an FYI. And then there's another one where we're trying to find innovation and new things to do. So that's all around possibility. Then there's the coaching, being able to coach each other. So since we were doing this with the leadership team for the client, we said within our own project team, we need to do the same thing. And I had one particular project manager under me that he and I, we just clashed. He'd think left and I'd think right, and he'd say up and I'd say down. And so what we did is we sat down and said, okay, what is it, what's the possibility? Could we have a great relationship? Can we have a successful project? Can we do all this stuff? And then it was, what do you, my project manager, what do you stand for? What is it that you want to do? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do on this project? What results do you want to get? What do you stand for? And when he shared that, then I said, okay, I will help you in that stand, and I will coach you. When I see you not operating against that stand, My job is to point that out to you, and you'll be open to me pointing that out to you. And really, you form really a pact between the two that they'll take the coaching and feedback, and you'll provide it. And that sounds pretty basic, but you'd be amazed how many project teams don't do that. You know, I even see it in my own organization. We are horrible at doing performance assessments. You know, we want to give everybody accolades, and you did this well. We don't give critical feedback. It's just not in our DNA at Fluor. We're changing that, but it is difficult. It's difficult to have those difficult conversations. We usually want to avoid those. We want to say, you're great, until the day we say you're out the door because you're not performing, okay? But that's what happens. It happens all the time. And it drives HR crazy because they're like, how can we let this person go? They've had stellar performance reviews for 4 straight years. Well, no. If you look over here, we got them low on the rating system. We got them low on the 9-box system. We got them low over here. We don't have to give them those results. The one we have to give them is the performance assessment, and we don't want to do that to their face. So you got to have that coaching. You got to have that open, honest dialogue to where you as the coachee and the coacher have that back and forth, and you do it in a safe environment. I'm not condemning you. I'm just pointing out you are not operating against your stand. And then looking for breakdowns, because they happen. Every project we have a breakdown. Every project we have problems. But how do I turn that around and turn it into breakthroughs? You know, instead of saying, why did this happen, criticizing people, it's, okay, how do we take this and turn it into something even better? How can we correct it? How can we make it even, not just correct it, bring it back to par, let's get it over the, so, you know, and one of the things we used to do, my colleague and I, he was running the high performance teams, I was running the transformation of the supply chain, one of the things we always said was, we know something is broken. We just know it. We don't know what, but we know something's broken, so let's go find it, and let's turn that from a breakdown to a breakthrough. So we were constantly looking for things that we thought could be happening. And then recognize and celebrate success. And I will tell you, this is probably, for me personally as a project manager, that's probably my most difficult thing. I'm always thinking ahead, I'm always thinking out, you know, next day, next week, next month, 2 years. And when we achieve a milestone, or we're successful in a metric, or you know, the team has knocked it out of the park, or an individual's really stepped up and done a great job, I tend to think about, well, that's great, but guess what? We got 50 more things we got to go do, okay? And what you find is that really demoralizes your team. So I've really had to stop, be more in the moment, and say, hey, let's celebrate. You know, let's recognize. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Just, you know, through emails, through little recognition things, through bonuses. We'll give them spot bonuses. But even things like just writing them a note on a card or a piece of paper by hand, and sending it to them and say thank you. Really do appreciate everything you've done to support us, everything you've done to accomplish this. Those little recognitions mean a lot to a lot of our team members. So, and that's one I constantly have to stop and say, okay, I need to recognize that we've really done a good job here. So my last slide, as I was thinking about this, was, you know, so I've been in project teams now for 40 years. What would I wish somebody had told me when I started this that I have learned over the years? So the first one is, you know what you don't know. Know what you don't know, and then find somebody who does. Good illustration of that, and this one I did kind of learn a little bit early in my management career. I was at Boeing as my second company, and we did the survival training exercise. You know, you're sitting at a table like this, you've got team members around you, you get the packet of paper, your plane has crashed, you know, what do you do? You know, what do you take, what do you keep, do you walk out, do you stay? You go through all those decisions, so you record that in your little book, you turn it in, and then they have you do it as a team. So again, same exercise, but now let's come up with one team answer for the entire table. So we were sitting at this table, another guy and I were the two most senior managers, and so we just kind of took over the conversation. Okay, we're gonna take the whiskey, we're gonna take, you know, all this stuff, we're gonna walk out of here. We're not gonna wait around, we're not gonna stay, we're not gonna die out here in the desert. We're gonna walk out and we're gonna live. And so they score the results, they give them back to us, I died a miserable death. You know, I mean, I probably made every decision that was in the opposite direction of what you should do. And then, you know, and the team died because I was one of the two people leading the answers. And so, but then all of a sudden there was one gentleman at our table, and he survived, and not only did he survive, he got nearly a perfect score. And we're like, what is going on? And he goes, well, I used to be in the Army, and I actually used to do survival training. And we're like, why didn't you speak up? And he goes, well, you guys are on such a roll, and you're more senior than me, I just let you go. And it's like, wow. I mean, that was, for me, that kind of hit me between the eyes and said, wait a second, okay, I don't know everything. I do need to know what I don't know, and I do need to stop and find the person who does know and then give them the authority to lead. And that kind of leads to the next one. So leadership is not always about leading. Sometimes you need to follow. And I found that to be so true in a project environment. And again, I had on one of my early consulting assignments, I had a vice president sit down with me, and he goes, now, Mike, you know I'm leading this project, so you know I am the leader, but he goes, you have a team, and when you're leading that team, you may need me, because I have some knowledge, to come in and help you with some portion of your team's activity. He goes, when I come into that team, you're the leader. I'm not taking over, you're the leader of that team. So he says, this is just the way we do it. Someday you lead, and someday you follow. And I said, got it. And it worked out. That has really worked well in my career. Along with that, you got to kind of at times suppress your ego. You know, too often I see project team members, their egos get big. You know, I'm now the big person around here. Everybody will do what I say. Well, guess what? Those teams tend to fail miserably. So really having that ability to suppress your ego and say, you know what, I just need to follow. Obviously, being open to new learnings and possibilities. You know, even one of the things the high-performing team taught me is, even though I was having difficulties with this project manager underneath me, I was always looking for that possibility that he was going to change, that he was making improvements, that he was getting better, that our relationship was growing. We never quite completely got there, I will have to admit, but you saw, we had the respect for each other to where we could have that dialogue, we could have that openness. But you know, always be looking for those possibilities in people, in systems, in tools. I mean, a lot of the tools and technologies that we're implementing right now at Fluor, nobody ever thought was possible. They said, why would we do that? We don't need RFID. We don't, you know. I had one project director, construction manager tell me, I've never lost a piece of material in my 30 years on projects. And I about threw up, because I'm like, okay, you've lost a lot of materials, you just won't admit it. But you know, these tools are very important. They really do help you execute a project. So knowing that we can do those things. I'll tell you, supply chain financing was something I never knew about until I went to a conference, kind of like this, and somebody started talking about supply chain financing. I said, ooh, I need to look at that, because that's going to help me with my days payable outstanding. It's going to help my cash flow. Our cash flow is very important. We spend a lot of money. That's a very important thing to companies. So being open to those possibilities and looking for those things has always been very, very good. The power of preparation. Again, I had a mentor at one point in my consulting career, and he said, Mike, you know, your teamwork is outstanding, your facilitation of the team is great, you build strong relationships, but I noticed you get into these sessions and you kind of free flow it, you kind of wing it. He goes, if you stopped and prepared, if you went into those a lot better prepared, a lot more information, a lot more knowledge, a view of the outcome, and you're going to work back from that outcome to where you are, how you're going to take them through those steps, he says, you'll be that much more successful. So for me, that was a great wake-up call. Be prepared. Make sure I go into the meetings, go into the work groups, go into the sessions, prepared with the knowledge that I need to have in order to be able to get them to the outcome that I foresee. And again, I talked about communication. You can never have too much communication. Where there's risk, volatility, uncertainty, you got to keep your people informed. It's just extremely important. Communication is so critical to making certain people feel less uncertain, feel less at risk, feel safe, and can operate. I'm reading a book right now called Crucial Conversations, and it's been out for a long time. I'm just getting around to it, so open to a new possibility. But it's a lot like as I talked about high-performing teams, but it's how do you manage those crucial conversations? And the premise is it's physiological. When we feel risk, when we feel threatened, when we feel there's something going wrong that may impact us, whether that's I could lose my job, I could get moved to a new city, all sorts of things that happen in transformations. When you feel that, your adrenal glands start kicking in, and next thing you know, you get more adrenaline in your system. You're getting ready. I mean, it's that fight or flight. We are gearing up for battle, or we're gearing up to run. One of those two. And as human beings, that's what we tend to do naturally. And Crucial Conversations is all about, no, there's a third option. It's just we usually don't look at that. We usually look at flight or fight, but there is a third option. So how do you use that adrenaline? How do you get the blood back in the head? How do you lower that level of risk and fright and be able to actually think rationally, think logically, and manage those crucial conversations? As I said, celebrate the small wins. Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. As often as possible, recognize someone, whether it's just a pat on the back, a thank you, a handshake, a recognition in a meeting, just a quick mention. It's amazing what that can do to help your team feel good about what they're doing. And then being in the moment and balance with the focus on the future. And that again, I tend to be thinking ahead and thinking into the future, and I'm not always there in the moment. And I'm sure we all do it on projects. You're on a project team, you may be operating remotely, you're sitting on a conference call for hours, and you're at your computer messaging people, you may be getting a presentation ready, you may be reviewing a report, and you're not in the moment. So you really do have to focus on where you are, what you're doing, be there with your team, be there helping them, and be in the moment, not thinking about other things, doing other things, or thinking about too far into the future. So with that, I'm done. Thank you. I guess.
Thanks very much, Mike. Really appreciate it. I think we all were having some flashbacks to our own life as we went through your presentation. We've got time for a few questions. I guess I'd like to start with a question that came to mind for me. And so you've had a tremendous life journey and being a transformational manager. So besides reading Cotter's book, what helped prepare you for that journey?
Oh my! One of the things when I talked about knowing what you don't know, and I'm trying to remember, it was right about the time the learning organization was becoming a fad or a fashion, and there was Chris Ardress was the author. He wrote a book about teaching smart people how to learn, and for me that was really eye-opening because he used consultants as his example, his sample, and he talked about how consultants. Most of them, high GPAs, very good education, very driven, and they've always been told throughout their entire lives that they're great, successful, and everything. And then you get into a consulting project and something fails. And what happens? And he said it's amazing when you start studying consultants, how many of them, it's like it's the first time in their life they've ever had any kind of failure or hiccup or anything, and they can't handle it. And so he talked a lot about that. He talked about you really need to know what you don't know. You need to know your limitations and know where you can find people that can help you with those areas that you're not strong in. And that to me was very, very profound early on in my consulting career.
Yes, I really enjoyed all your talking, particularly the first part when you're talking about Watson and artificial intelligence. I've been to some IBM Think conferences, and IBM, talked about that, and even some of their services say how they use it for contracts. But it's interesting, a company that's actually using it. And I know part of Watson is trying to learn from the data and stuff. My question, how do you sort of segregate the Fluor stuff with maybe what IBM would doing with it? I mean, do you do it yourself, or does your learning transition to Watson that IBM might use other places, or how's all that controlled?
So we call it IBM Watson, but the actual tool, ePhD, is branded under Fluor Watson. So it's a partnership with the Watson lab. We own the data. We actually run, the solution actually runs on our computers on site. So we're not using IBM's systems. We're using their Watson team of data scientists to help us define the algorithms and get them in. We also have hired data scientists ourselves. So some of it we're self-performing, Some of it we're getting from the Watson Lab team. All the data, though, all the cleansing, everything else, we've done ourselves, and we're doing that internally. And again, like I said, now we've got the big drive on data standardization. So that's been, again, an internal effort where we are doing that ourselves. Like I said, there are some additional things we want to do with IBM Watson. I will tell you they're expensive. We spent a lot of money on them. We are looking at not necessarily other solution providers, other data analytics firms, but we are looking for things we can, because we're starting to see more off-the-shelf type applications. For instance, actually, IBM used to have, or does have, a supply chain system called mTORUS. They've decided to sunset that and get out of that business. They've actually now, Watson signed an agreement with Ariba, which is a competitor to mTORUS, and they're going to provide data analytics into Ariba. And good for us, we actually chose Ariba 3 years ago, and we're in the process of implementing that. But they've got 4 different data analytic tools that they are developing. So I think in the future, what we'll see is less customized data analytic tools like EPHD and MDSA, and more commercial off-the-shelf tools that we're starting to see come into the marketplace, like the Ariba tools that Watson is helping with.
Hi, my name is Mei Ling. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Awesome, I'm doing great.
Good.
You talk about 15 years of data and 120 projects is in the data visualization project. How many data scientists you hire or in this team, and what is the resource for doing this transformation? Because a lot of people probably don't know how difficult for it, maybe how easy for your company. We would like to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I believe we currently have about 6 data scientists. We'll probably add a few more, but not much more than that. We don't want to, we still want to rely on commercial off-the-shelf and other applications, the Watson things, but we know we need to have data scientists that can do things for ourselves. So we're trying to find that right balance, but I'd say right now we're 6, maybe going to 10. There's been talk of putting data scientists into supply chain, into other areas. Construction wants to do some data analytics work. But for now, we've kept it in a central team, so all the data analytics projects go through that central team, so we can control and make sure we're not just proliferating data scientists all over the organization. So it's a small, centralized team of data scientists. Yep. Question? Oh.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Davis. I have a question. So you mentioned several tools that you're leveraging nowadays for all the process besides Watson. So what's the process in terms of deciding what tools do you use? Are you working directly with the IT organization, and are you sponsoring these projects, or they are defining the solutions and bring up to you? So what's the relationship between your business units and IT organization?
Okay, so the fortune I have is I report to our EVP of systems and supply chain. So he has both IT systems and the supply chain organization. So that makes it a lot easier. I go to him and usually get all this stuff approved. We're a big user of Gartner, so we'll go out and talk to Gartner, who's in the Magic Quadrant, who are some of the key leading solution providers in an area we're interested in. And then, so we'll start there, and then we'll go through some sort of evaluation, look at the ROI, convince ourselves there's value to using this tool, and then who do we think is the best fit for us. Ariba's a very expensive system, but for us, we wanted a global supply chain tool that was end-to-end. We didn't want to have to piecemeal a lot of different supply chain tools and integrate that. We wanted an end-to-end solution. So that was one of the big criteria for us with Ariba. Yeah, it all depends upon the systems we're working with as to which how we evaluate them and how we select them. I will tell you, we haven't gotten everything we've wanted. There's limited capital available, and so we've had a couple of rejections. We'd love to do more around logistics. We'd love to do more in the contract management space. So that's why we're hoping the new Ariba data analytics tool is going to help us there.
You had mentioned that you have your major project silos, organizational silos, end up with data silos, so it sounds like you're trying to get rid of the data silos and bring the projects and their data into the broader picture.
Yes.
Does that also mean that Fluor is moving more towards an organizational project management philosophy across the corporation, or is that something way out in the future?
It's a good question. So today, we operate everything on a project task force. So that, when we're executing a project for an owner, that task force, that project team, including, everything from project managers to engineering, construction, fabrication, supply chain, they are on that team and they're on the task force. And that's why we've had some of the challenges we have, because they all adopt their own data standards, their own way of doing things. So now we're saying, nope, this is what you're going to follow. In supply chain, I have looked at, do I take some of my procurement off task force and actually do it in a central location or a central fashion instead of on task force? So we are looking at some of those models, and whether or not we evolve that way, we're still trying to determine. But I do think there's value. Last year, my organization spent $15 billion. So that's a lot of spend. Now, the problem is I'm spending it in Kazakhstan and Kuwait and California and East Coast and Gulf Coast, South America. So, and they're coming in at all different times for all different applications and industries. So I can't club a lot of that spend together and get the synergies I think I should be able to. But I am looking at those models and whether or not that makes sense to take some of that off the task force and do it centrally. And some of my competition do it that way.
Great, thanks, Mike. We're in extra time right now. We don't want to use up your entire coffee break, so I think we need to cut off questions and invite folks to come down and meet with you afterwards if you have a few minutes to stay with us.
I will.
Susan's got a parting gift here for you.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Oh, great, thank you very much. Thank you.
We have a super duper Texas-sized cutting board in there.
Excellent, thank you.
So you can cut up the next board meeting. Congratulations,
Thank
great
you. Thank you very much.
presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.